There is a verse in Proverbs that the men's content world would rather not look at directly. Not because it's obscure, it is famous. It is quoted at commencements. It is recited in devotionals across the English-speaking world. It has appeared on more greeting cards and embroidered pillows than I care to count. And most people who cite it have no idea what it actually demands. Proverbs 16:32. Better a patient man than a warrior. Better one who controls his temper than one who takes a city. If you understand that verse correctly, not in its greeting card form, but in the actual weight of what it is saying, it is one of the most dangerous and demanding statements in all of Scripture about what it means to be a man. Here's why the greeting card reading is wrong. The greeting card version reads this as a passage about gentleness, about lowering your intensity, about being nice, about not reacting, about being the kind of man who doesn't cause scenes. The therapeutic version reads it as permission to process rather than act, to feel rather than lead. Both of those miss the point so completely they almost invert it. Proverbs 16:32 is not telling you to be less. It is telling you that the hardest conquest is an interior one. It is telling you that the warrior who takes a city, which is not a small thing, cities in the ancient world were heavily fortified, and taking one required extraordinary discipline, courage, strategy, and physical force under sustained pressure. That man, for all his formidable capability, has accomplished something less demanding than the man who masters himself. Read it again. The man who masters himself has done something harder than taking a fortified city. This is not a verse for soft men. If a soft man reads this verse honestly, it destroys him, because it removes every excuse. You cannot tell me that the path of least resistance, the explosion, the cold withdrawal, the passive aggression, the slow simmer that poisons everything it touches, you cannot tell me that is the strong option. The strong option is to stand in the fire of your own anger, your own wounded pride, your own legitimate frustration, and choose. Let me tell you about a season in my own life. I was being treated unfairly. I won't give you details that belong to another person, but the situation was real, the injustice was measurable, and everything in me, the part of me that understood power and how to use it, the part that had learned how to be forceful, that part was ready. It was assembled. It was waiting for the signal. What Proverbs 16:32 required of me in that season was not silence. It was not passivity. It was not the kind of peace that avoids difficulty entirely. What it required was something harder than any of those. To hold the anger, and there was real anger, anger with data behind it, and not let it govern the response. To remain present and clear and direct without the explosion that would have been so much easier. To address what needed to be addressed from a position of strength held under control, not strength leaked through the breach. The explosion would have felt like strength. It would have looked like strength, and it would have cost me something it takes years to rebuild. What I did instead didn't feel like strength at the time. It felt like restraint. And restraint, when the provocation is real, is the most demanding thing a man can practice. I know that now in a way I didn't know before that season. The men's content space does one of two things with anger. The first is suppression. Anger is dangerous. Emotional intelligence is the future of masculinity. Be measured. Don't be reactive. Process more. Act less. The problem with this approach is that it mistakes mastery for elimination. A man who does not feel anger, or who has conditioned himself to disconnect from it, has not become the patient man of Proverbs. He has simply lost contact with a legitimate signal. Suppressed anger is not mastered anger. It is anger that has gone underground and will surface somewhere else, in something else, in someone who does not deserve it. The second approach is permission. Your anger is valid. Men have been wronged. Masculine anger is specifically appropriate given what has been done to the culture, to the family, to your specific life. The manosphere version of this is particularly persuasive because there is something true at its core. Anger is a legitimate response to legitimate injustice. There are things in this world worth being angry about, but a man who has built his identity around his rage, who wears it as armor, who confuses passion with fury, who performs indignation as a spiritual practice, that man is not powerful. He is controlled. The thing that makes him angry is running him. And a man who is run by what makes him angry is not a free man. He is a reactive one. Proverbs 16:32 holds, "The center both approaches miss." The patient man of Proverbs is not a man who does not feel. He is a man who commands what he feels. He is a man in whom the fire is real, because fire without fuel is just a dimming coal, but whose fire is under the authority of his will, his judgment, his values, and ultimately his God. He is the man who can stand in the full heat of his own anger and choose when, how, and whether it enters the world. That is not the mild man. That is the trained warrior. And training a warrior is harder than making one. So what does this mastery actually look like as a practice? The first thing to understand is that the patient man of Proverbs is not passive about his anger. He is active in a different direction. He does not let the pressure build until explosion is the only remaining valve. He learns to read his own interior landscape, to notice early when the heat is rising, to ask what is actually activating it, to sit with what it is telling him before deciding what it requires. Because anger is almost always information. This is what the suppression approach permanently misses. Anger is a signal about something that matters, a violation of something valued, an injustice against something real. The anger is not the problem. The anger unchecked and unexamined is the problem. The practice is discernment. What is this anger telling me, and what does it actually require? Not every anger requires action. Some require patience, the willingness to wait for full information rather than respond in the heat of partial information. Some requires quiet confrontation, addressing what needs to be addressed without the explosion that would burn down the relationship along with the problem. And some require what the scripture calls righteous anger, the moment when anger is the appropriate fuel for a clear and direct naming of something that has been wrong for too long. The model for that third kind is not a sermon illustration. It is Jesus in the temple. He does not lose control. He evaluates the situation. He is moved by what is genuinely wrong. And then he stops and braids cords together, which takes time and deliberateness and intentionality. And then he acts with full force, full intention. The anger becomes precise. It is not suppressed, and it is not leaked. It is directed. James 1:19-20 says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." The key phrase is human anger, not anger. Human anger. Anger driven by wounded pride, by the need for control, by the compulsion to dominate the situation, by the demand to be right and to be seen as right. That anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. But there is another kind. The scripture recognizes it, and its model is not a man who never feels the fire. Its model is a man who has learned what the fire is for. David, in the Psalms, is not a calm man. He brings his rage to God, fully, without performance, without pretending to a composure he does not have. Psalm 4, "In your anger do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent." He does not tell David not to be angry. He tells him, "Do not sin in it. Bring it to me. Search the heart under it, and be still enough to hear what I say back." That is the model. Not suppression, not permission. Submission and direction. The man who submits his anger to examination, to God, to the patient practice of discernment before action, that man is doing something harder than almost any other masculine discipline. He is taking the most powerful, most dangerous, most primal force in his interior life and bringing it under command. That is what Proverbs 16:2 is asking, and it is asking it of men who are strong enough to do it. Here's what I want to leave you with. Not a system, a practice. The next time you feel the heat, the surge, the moment when the easy path is explosion or withdrawal, stop before you act. 90 seconds. Not to suppress it, to examine it. What is this anger about? What does it come to tell me? What does it actually require of me as a man? 90 seconds of that examination is the beginning of mastery. You will not do it perfectly. You will miss it sometimes and act from the heat. And when you do, you name it, make it right where you can, and begin again. That is not failure, that is the practice. The warrior who takes a city is impressive. The man who commands himself is dangerous in ways a city taker can never touch. He is free in ways that rage will never allow. Say this and mean it. My anger does not run me, I run it.